Hey guys, I'm Hellhound, and I figured I'd take a break from my recent 80s slasher marathon for today's Midnight Spook Show, and instead we're going to take a look at one of the best horror anthologies ever made. As you probably already know, I'm a huge fan of everything Tales from the Crypt and all its associated media. And I've already talked about the original comics from where it all started. Oh yeah, I love these. Love these things. I've been reading them all my life. I grew up reading them. They're excellent. They're so much fun. I love horror comics, and Tales from the Crypt are among the very best. Hell yeah. Love it. So yeah, I've already covered the comics. I have already talked about the excellent television series, which is probably where most people where people are most familiar with the Tales from the Crypt name. Yeah, these are all great. And so, oh yeah, great show. I'm glad they didn't bring it back though, because I heard that they were planning on doing with it, and it sounded terrible. Like there's gonna be no Crypt Keeper, no John Kazir. It was gonna be just terrible. It wasn't gonna be at all like the show, but that show was amazing, groundbreaking. So yeah, I've already covered the comics and the television series. So now let's go ahead and discuss the 1972 feature film adaptation. It was obviously based on the comic books of the same name and directed by Freddie Francis, who was also he also directed an episode of the TV show and was behind some of the Hammer horror movies as well. Now this great anthology, a double feature with Vault of Horror, which is also really good. I'll get to that later. Review for that one coming soon. Now, this is right up there with the likes of Creep Show and Tales in the Dark of the movie and Body Bags and Dead Time Stories and Black Sabbath and Trick or Treat and, yeah, among one of the best horror anthologies ever. Tales in the Crypt, 1972. It has 5 segments which were loosely adapted from the EC horror comics from the 50s, such as not only Tales from the Crypt, but, also its sister series, Vault of Horror and Haunt of Fear, too. They all had their hosts, the Crypt Keeper, Vault Keeper, the Old Witch, and there's of course there was also Creepy with Uncle Creepy and Cousin Eerie and all the House of Mystery had this wolf gang telling the stories. But anyway, the wraparound story consists of 5 people who get lost in the catacombs during a tour. They break away from the group and they meet up with a mysterious Crypt Keeper played by Sir Ralph Richardson. Each of these 5 people are evil in some way and are capable of murder, kidnapping, and other despicable deeds against humanity. So, the Crypt Keeper reveals the twisted fate of each one of them. Now, they're all scumbags who deserve the harsh and tragic events that await them, which makes it all the more rewarding to watch. And that's where the segments, which again take inspiration from the stories in the comics, come into play. So, let's break down each one. Alright, now the first story is called An All Through the House, and it concerns Joan Collins, who was also in Star Trek in the 60s Batman show, as Joanne, a woman who kills her husband on Christmas Eve and is later stalked and attacked by a maniac dressed in a Santa Claus outfit in her home. Now her daughter, who's supposed to be asleep, and waiting for Santa to come bring her presents the next morning, under the tree, lets the killer inside inadvertently, thinking that he's the real Saint Nick. Now, this is probably my favorite segment from this movie. And, it's kind of a shame since it's the very first one, and hence we kind of get the best over with, the quickest. It's very simple and quite short. It's still very effective nonetheless. I love the idea of a killer Santa, and this movie did it way before Silent Night, Deadly Night, or Christmas Evil, or To All Good Night, This movie did it first. And we don't know too much about the murderer other than the fact that he's escaped a mental institution and is going on a sleigh ride to deck the halls with chunks of bodies, and I love it. Horror with a Christmas setting is great, and this same story was also adapted into the TV show with an episode of the TV show with Larry Drake as the murderous Kris Kringle. So all in all, definitely a very satisfying tale, and very likely the best, at least in my opinion. Now, next is A Reflection of Death, and while this is probably my least favorite segment in, overall, it's still very good. In fact, all the stories here are done well. Unlike most anthologies, that usually have like 1 or 2 clunkers. But this one, they're all great. All very well thought out, and based on, excellent stories from the comics, which were also done very well. So yeah, this one depicts depicts the story of Carl, played by Ian Hendry, who leaves his family to run off with a younger woman who he's been having an affair with. They get into a car accident, and he returns as a confused and frightened walking corpse, only to be rejected by everyone he knew in life. Again, this is likely the weakest entry, but I still enjoy it quite a bit, just not on the same level as the others. Now, the third ghastly tale is Poetic Justice, which is about a snobbish and uptight father and son who think they're better than everybody and have a particular dislike for their neighbor Arthur, who is played by the one and only Peter Cushing. The legendary Cushing, he needs no introduction, and if you don't know who he is, well, he's had many great roles, but my two favorites would be Van Helsing from the Hammer Dracula series, and Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars. Yeah, Cushing's always great. But anyway, Arthur, who is kind to animals and children, but, you know, he's kind of dirty, and I guess people just don't like him. He's a little creepy and weird. He's driven to suicide by the cruel father and son duo, but returns as a vengeful zombie to give them their just desserts, and boy is justice served. This is my second favorite segment, and easily the most satisfying of the five. Cushing is great, and I absolutely adore revenge stories, so Poetic Justice is very good. And it's the middle segment too, so at this point in the movie you're probably hooked. Now, next we have Wish You Were Here, and this is probably the scariest and goriest of the stories in which we have an ineffective businessman named Ralph, played by Richard Green, who's getting closer to financial ruin. His wife finds a strange Chinese figurine which supposedly grants 3 wishes. Now, this story is very similar to The Monkey's Paw by W. W. Jacobs, which is one of the scariest ghost stories I've ever read. It's definitely a good place to take inspiration from. The characters even reference that story and try to avoid the same thing happening when making their wishes, so I won't give away exactly what happens, but if you've read The Monkey's Paw, you'll probably see it coming. You'll probably kind of know. Yeah, it is interesting, as I said, all the characters are, they talk about, wait a minute, this is like that story, and let's try not to repeat the same mistakes that those characters did. I thought that was a pretty cool addition, so all in all, this is probably the darkest and most gruesome entry, and probably my next least favorite after Reflection of Death, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means, not at all. It's just not quite as enjoyable as those top 3 that I have. Yeah, I would say this one's most likely the most effective in like the scares department and suspense and stuff. So it definitely counts for something. And it was also made into an episode of the TV show, but changed. That one was changed a lot, renamed Last Respects. So it was very similar to that premise, but done a lot differently. Not quite as similar as in All Through the House and its respective TV counterpart. So yeah, just because I said that's my next least favorite doesn't mean it's bad at all. It's my 4th favorite out of the 5, but still very well done. All these are well done, as I said, Alright, and finally we have Blind Alleys, the last story, and probably my 3rd favorite. It's another revenge story focusing on Major William Rogers, played by Nigel Patrick, who is a cruel and unkind director of a home for the blind, who constantly makes cuts to the budget and funding to enhance his own luxurious lifestyle and make the lives of the residents a living hell. But they soon set a deadly trap for the cold-hearted Major and turn the tables. All in all, this is an excellent segment, and the 3rd one out of the 5 to also be adapted into an episode of the show with the name Revenge of the Nuts. Yeah, very good revenge story. Really feel bad for the blind people, and definitely want to see them show the cruel director who's boss. They turn the tables on him. Predator becomes the prey. I love that type of thing. So yeah, a lot of revenge stories. A lot of usually the horror is actually happening to people who deserve it, which is pretty unique for a horror film. And that's kind of how the comics were too. That's how a lot of those horror comics were, creepy and eerie, and House of Mystery and Ghost Tales from the Haunted House. A lot of them were like that. And then of course, obviously, Tales of the Crypt, the namesake. And Haunt of Fear and Vault of Horror, of course. And so, alright, well, all in all, there's only one final thing to talk about, and that's the Crypt Keeper himself. We're all familiar with the skeletal zombie puppet voiced by John Kazir, who constantly makes bad puns and laughs maniacally. I love that character to death from the TV show. He's just great. But the Crypt Keeper here appears, he looks more human, and he appears to be alive. Making appearances can be deceiving, after all. And he never makes jokes, and he doesn't have a humorous demeanor at all. He's a lot less lighthearted. He's actually quite serious, sinister, and very creepy. And you know, there's also a twist concerning our 5 lead characters that I dare not give away. And bookended by one of the greatest ironic lines I've ever heard in a movie, spoken by the Crypt Keeper himself. I won't tell. You know, you'll just have to see this awesome movie for yourself. But yeah, I just love that closing line. You know, he breaks the fourth wall. Oh, he's great. Yeah. Sir Ralph Richardson did a great job as the Crypt Keeper, and you know what? Well, I guess overall I do prefer the version from the TV show voiced by John Kazir, because he's just so hilarious and great. But I'd say this one was definitely definitely creepier, definitely maybe more evil. You know, he didn't really have a cruel, dark sense of humor. It was just he was just there to show people their fate. You know, that was like his job. So pretty cool. But yeah, they always had the hosts. You know, the old witch and the vault keeper and the Crypt Keeper being the best of them. And here he was a lot more like he was in the comic. Just looked like an elderly man who knew a whole lot that was going on. You know, I mean, he looked like an old man, but he's definitely another entity all entirely, probably a mortal being. Great storyteller. But yeah, all in all, definitely check out Tales from the Crypt. Great movie. This one was, came out way before the TV series, and a lot of people kind of forgotten about it, it seems like. And yeah, Vault of Horror is really good too. It's pretty much a spiritual successor. It's a follow-up. It's based on the, shares the same name as Tales from the Crypt sister series, Vault of Horror. They never did make a Haunt of Fear, at least I don't think they did. If they did, it wasn't very well known. My only complaint is that Vault of Horror doesn't have the Vault Keeper. It doesn't have somebody telling the stories that are just in there. But we'll get to that later. But that might be the next review I do. But for now, I've been Hellhound, Tales from the Crypt. Great anthology if you're into horror anthologies, and if you love those horror comics from the 50s and 60s and 70s and so on, check it out. I think you're going to love it. Hi guys, I'm Hellhound. Once again, I just said that, didn't I? And thank you for watching my Midnight Spook Show. So until next time, keep it horror.